Hi, all. Welcome to Royally Unfiltered, the show that takes you behind palace gates like never before. This is where tradition meets truth and nothing is off limits. This week, helping me tackle all the biggest headlines is world-renowned royal author Hugo Vickers and former press secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth II and King Charles III, the remarkable Dickie Arbiter. Thank you for being here. I do have the A-team. I'm aware of it, and I'm very excited about it.
We are too.
Oh, thank you. You both have been in this world for so long, and I feel silly continuing to talk about the Prince Harry immigration case because I'm pretty confident that Donald Trump would not do anything to jeopardize his relationship with the royal family. But I'll start with you, Hugo. There is some historical significance here to see a royal the even discussion of a royal potentially being deported from the United States because of dishonesty on immigration papers. I mean, it's worth giving oxygen to. Am I correct or incorrect there?
Well, I think it's one of those situations where you have to apply the same rules to everybody. And if he's been given preferential treatment, as something's been overlooked, well, then Trump will want to undo that. And of course, Trump is also not a great fan, particularly not of Meghan Markle, because she was very rude about him early on. And he was, on the other hand, hugely admiring of our late Queen, whose accession day it would have been today, 6th of February. But, you know, he might decide to have a go at him, and he might decide to, it would be in a way a sort of slightly cheap shot. I think Donald Trump's got more important things to worry about than Prince Harry, but I can see it would obviously get a lot of publicity if he suddenly decided to boot him out. And the reason that he would do that would be on some technicality, but also he's quite right, of course, that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle both did upset the Queen a lot in the last 2 years of her life. There's no question about that at all. And that's something for which is pretty unforgivable.
But Dickie, I know that Melania Trump has talked about how she's a special pen pal with King Charles. I would almost say that you could translate that into friendship. Do you believe that President Trump would do anything to harm that special relationship that it feels like the Trump family has with the royal family? Hurting Harry almost hurts the king. Am I being too sensitive?
I think you might be being a bit too sensitive. Trump has great admiration for the British monarchy. He had a good relationship with our late Queen, and a good relationship with the King when he was the Prince of Wales, as did Melania. And they wouldn't want to do anything to harm that relationship. But at the end of the day, Trump thinks about America first, and he feels that nobody should be above the law. Now, Harry openly admitted in his book Spare that he did take drugs, that cocaine wasn't all that it lived up to be. So, you know, there is an admission of having taken drugs. Now, American immigration are very strict on drug takers. They don't allow them in the States, and yet Harry is there. So they want to clear this up. There's a certain amount of immunity that was granted Harry by the Biden administration. Harry is kind of entitled to a diplomatic passport or diplomatic immunity, although he's not a diplomat, but working royals. But then you see the other side of the coin. Harry is not a working royal. He walked away from it. He was not stripped, but told he cannot use HRH, His Royal Highness. So between the devil and the deep blue sea, I don't think Trump will want to get involved, but he's got all his people in place in the right place. Department of Homeland Security and Immigration, and he'll watch from the sidelines and let it take its course and see what happens from there. Might be a presidential declaration, we don't know, but let's wait and see.
Hugo, Harry and Meghan complain about this intrusive press, the intrusive press and violating their privacy. Prince Harry could make this go away by just being honest about what he said on his papers. Why is he not just, this story could have died 2 years ago if he just would have said, well, here's a copy of it. I was honest. I was upfront. It was the plague. So they were willing to let me through. I don't know. It just seems silly that he will complain about the press intrusion, but doesn't actively stop it by just being honest and upfront.
Well, do we know what he put on his application? He may have done what a lot of people do, I imagine, and put no when sometimes they should put yes, because it stops a lot of questions being asked, and usually these things just go through. I'm not advocating that, by the way, but that maybe well is what happened. Then, of course, there was another interesting thing, which was that there was a rumor, I don't know if it's more than that, that they were buying a property in Portugal, and that made me wonder whether perhaps they were thinking, if Trump does boot us out, we've got somewhere to go. I don't know.
That's right. That I was just thinking about that. Someone asked me where would they go. I said, well, Portugal or Canada, I imagine. Dickie, it is a little interesting that now that it's the Trump administration, the same judge has a change of heart. Do you think that that's a little suspicious?
Slightly suspicious, but then the same judge was under the Biden administration, and things have changed under the Trump administration. Hugo saying about a rumor that the Sussexes have bought a property or thinking of buying a property in Portugal. Harry is a Brit. Now, UK is out of the European Union, which means Harry only gets 90 days if he decides to go to Portugal out of 180. So he can't go there and live there forever because it just doesn't work. Everybody who's a Brit and doesn't have the proper papers is only allowed 90 days out of 180. So let's wait and see on that one. But I think the judge now, he probably feels on safe ground. His president, he's a Republican, put there in 2018 by President Trump in his first term, and he now feels that he can go a little bit further and open up those papers. How far and how much he opens remains to be seen. But when you start redacting, then that opens a whole can of worms, and people will ask all sorts of questions. They'll ask more questions if it's redacted than they have been so far.
Okay, one more question on this I'll ask both of you. Have you noticed that Harry and Meghan pulled back politically? They did seem to be more outspoken. I don't know if you remember this, but during I believe it was the 2020 campaign season, Meghan did multiple digital events with Michelle Obama and Kamala Harris. They sat down with when they were hosting the Time Most Influential People for ABC. They made reference to they hinted at voting for Biden, encouraging voting for Biden and change and positive change. It seems like they have reeled that outspoken political commentary in. Is it because they're trying to build a commercial brand and they realize that they are alienating 50% of the country by leaning heavily towards one side of the political aisle? Or were they fearful of Donald Trump being elected and potentially encouraging this, chaos around Prince Harry's visa? Dickie, I'll start with you.
Well, they're not very good at listening to advice. They listened to the last person that spoke to them. And meddling and muddling around in politics is not good for a brand. If you've got a brand and you've got a sellable brand, and when they started out, they had the potential of a sellable brand. But today, a lot of people are not going to go near them because they're too toxic. So it's backtracking. Having made that political stance, they're now backtracking, trying to recapture lost ground. Whether they can do or not, mud does stick. And whether they can recapture that lost ground remains to be seen. There's a lifestyle series coming out in Netflix next month. How successful that is. Polo failed on Harry's front. How successful that is remains to be seen. I personally don't like lifestyle. I never watch cookery programs. I think they're cheap television. And they'll only appeal to a certain quarter. But let's go back to the brand. If you want to sell a brand, don't be political, because mud does stick. And administrations change every 4 years in the United States. If you're lucky, changes every 8 years. But mud does stick, and administration has changed, and they backtrack from this sort of open support of the Democrats.
Hugo, do you have an opinion? Do you think it was fear of the visa, or do you think or the immigration papers being released, or do you think that they were astute to realize that if they continued on this, if they continued on the political path, it would be harder to be mainstream commercial celebrities?
Well, I completely accept everything that Dickie says, and I go along with that. Furthermore, I would add that, of course, they've gone down. I mean, Dickie represented, in the press, the British royal family, the working royal. So he knows perfectly well, and I don't have to say this really, that they are working for the United Kingdom and they were putting things into life. They are serving the nation. These two have gone down the celebrity route, and that's a completely different route to go down. And therefore, in their case, they have to continually reinvent themselves. And whether that's by avoiding politics or whether it's, like him doing one particular thing or she doing a cookery thing or whatever it is, they're always coming up with some new idea. And sometimes these ideas work, but by and large, again, I agree with Dickie. On the whole, they don't seem to be. And I can't help feeling that in the fullness of time, it's going to end rather badly.
Yeah, it's almost like whiplash with the rebranding. I'm seeing now that we should anticipate to see them very much together, and trying to put on a united family front at Invictus next week because they were so startled by the Vanity Fair rumor that Meghan was shopping a divorce book. And somebody in their camp decided that the professional separation wasn't working. I felt like it was working wonderfully for Prince Harry. I felt like it wasn't working for Meghan Markle. People were highly critical of her walking the constant red carpets by herself. It looked ridiculous. So it's interesting that it was working great for Prince Harry, but we're going to terminate that glow off of him now and thrust them back together. And it's exhausting to watch because I guess it's the constant reinvention, but it's almost like if you don't stick to something, it's harder to establish a fan base. It's harder to establish an audience when you're just bouncing all over the place. Let's talk about something a little bit more positive. I loved the picture that Prince Louis took of the Princess of Wales for World Cancer Day. Again, all of these body language experts are coming out talking about how fierce and confident Catherine looked. But I'd like to talk about what a great little photographer Prince Louis is, first and foremost. Well, we could talk about Catherine too. But Hugo, how cute was it to see a picture taken by little Louis?
I thought it was amazing. I was asked about this and was asked to look at this picture, and I was expecting another normal sort of royal photograph, and suddenly out comes this extraordinary, rather in some ways quite dark image. The sort of the dead trees and the tree trunk, and the mother standing there in a sort of quasi-religious pose. The rapport between mother and son, of course, fantastic. I went on record as saying I think that picture should go into the National Portrait Gallery. And I also think that
Yeah,
when
yeah.
Prince went back to school, he'd be highly commended for his work. I think he did something brilliant. But if you think of that picture as, a poster for a film, it's quite a dark film, isn't it? It's not exactly a comedy. So there's a lot going on there. And so I can well understand why people have different opinions. But I thought it was fascinating. And it also showed, we've been brought up to believe, that Prince Louis is a scamp, that he's just making jokes and he's seeking attention. And here's a very thoughtful, very observant, very perceptive Prince Louis with great rapport with his mother. I loved it.
Me too, Dickie. I'm glad that Hugo mentioned the some of the negative feedback because I was personally offended by it. I did see some people say, "Oh, it's awful." First of all, how can you say that about a child's image? Second of all, do you agree that it's beautiful, even if it is dark? There's something really beautiful about this image.
I think it's stunning, actually. And, it's very easy to be negative. You've got to work at being positive. And yeah, there are a lot of negative people around. But what this picture also says is an extension of the Princess of Wales's work. She's very much focused on early life and communicating with children and children communicating with their parents and with other people. Now, I travel on public transport a lot in London, and I have seen so many times mothers gossiping on the phone and the child is agitated. They give the child a phone. What's wrong with talking to that child? They're breeding a generation of morons because all they can do is watch something on the phone, text on the phone. There was a survey here a few weeks ago talking to youngsters. They are actually scared to talk on the telephone. The telephone is there to talk on, not to play around with, but they are scared. There's one young guy said he hadn't spoken on the telephone for 4 years. He's scared to answer it. And that is what is being bred today with these smartphones. Mothers, for goodness sake, stop playing around with your phones. Listen to your kids, talk to your kids, read to your kids, teach them how to read, teach them how to be human beings, not encourage them to grow up as morons. Kids today go in a restaurant, they're on their telephones. They go on the bus, they're on their telephones. You get idiots crossing the road looking at their telephones. It happens all the time. And it's a very sad world we're living in if people are glued to their telephones. I think one day somebody's going to invent a third eye, which means that two eyes you can look where you're going, and a third eye you can look at your telephone. Then we'll have a bit of safety on the roads.
That's so funny. I'm glad you brought up the Early Years Project, because I sense, similar to the image, that this wardrobe, this new wardrobe request has to do with that as well. Because as fun as the Vanity Fair article was that recently came out, the scathing Vanity Fair article about Harry and Meghan kind of slumming it over the last 5 years and not really hitting the mark. I did not like the criticism towards Catherine about how Meghan keeps reinventing herself, but Catherine's been doing the Early Years for 11 years, and what's come of it? I mean, I can tell you what's come of it. There are plenty of surveys and analytics. I don't have a child, but I am preaching to my brothers who have children about how important it is that they are engaged, and, you know, that these first few years determine who these adults will become, you know. That really bothered me. Do you get the sense that I doubt she maybe she knows about it. I doubt that it affects her as much as it annoys me. But do you get a sense at all that the please focus on my work and not my wardrobe is because she really does want to shift the focus to that? Or is she trying to distance herself from Meghan, whose brand has become, I invest in something, then I wear it, I'm monetizing all of these different ways? Does Catherine just not want to be an influencer like that? I want to distance myself from that as much as possible. Hugo, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think that's all very interesting. First of all, I don't think she spends much time wondering what Meghan Markle's up to.
Okay.
Secondly, you say 11 years she's been working on this project. Well, that's exactly reinforces your point earlier on, that you've got to stick to things, and you know, it takes a while for things to get going. And then when they do, I mean, look at the present king with his kind of climate change and his green issues and things. He and his architecture even. He was so criticized years ago, and now people respect him. So there's all that. And with the wardrobe thing, I think that's also rather interesting. You know, that they're not going to put out any statements, but it seems to me that whatever the Princess of Wales wears, somebody will pop up and tell you exactly who made it and how much it costs and where you can buy one in the high street, even, or if it's haute couture, if it's come off a peg. So I don't think we need worry about that too much. I think people will still be able to identify that, and of course people are interested, let's face it, in what she wears. But you know, full marks to her for concentrating on the main issue in hand. That's what it's really all about.
I'd like to come in here because this is history repeating itself. And Hugo will remember when Diana, Princess of Wales, first came on the scene at the end of 1980, they sort of looked at her, this beautiful girl, looking at what she wore. And then she got married. Now, in those days, I was a broadcast journalist. I didn't join the palace until 88. But in those days, Diana was looked upon as a clothes horse rather than a workhorse. It was, she's got a long hem, she's got above the knee hem. She bites her nails, she doesn't bite her nails. She's got a short hairstyle, she's changed the color of her hair. Every day it was something different about Diana, the clothes horse rather than the workhorse. And it took about 5 or 6 years for people to start recognizing that she was actually doing a superb job of work on the charity front. And Hugo would have seen this as well. So what we've got Princess of Wales taking the initiative and saying, I'm a workhorse. I'm not a clothes horse. Yeah, of course, people are going to look at what she's wearing and they're going to figure out, the fashionistas are going to come out and say, yeah, that comes from that store, that comes from that store. It's going to be easy, but they're not going to get the information from Kensington Palace, the shoes, the dress, the earrings, the makeup, you name it, whatever. They're going to have to figure that out for themselves. And in a while, they're going to lose interest in that and really will focus on what she's doing.
And I think that that is so important because I was trying to prepare for next week as we get ready for the Invictus Games. And I was thinking about how most of the updates we got from the Invictus Games from Team Sussex was what Meghan was wearing that day, that she did her own hair and makeup, martyr. But I thought, there are so many more important stories coming from the Invictus Games. Think about those personal, just individuals that have suffered so much, have accomplished so much, and are doing what they can to support themselves and their families. Those are the compelling stories. And I'd much rather have those being pumped out of Canada next week versus what she's wearing. And I guarantee you, we're going to get an earful of what, head to toe, what's on. Yeah,
and the other thing, sorry to interrupt, we do not want to see her marching with the veterans. That's not her job. She did that last time, and she got so much criticism for it, that she was amongst the veterans marching and sort of, in totally the wrong type of outfit, marching along there.
In front of them, in front of all of them.
Yeah, in front of them. So no marching. If you want to go to the Invictus Games, you stay in the stand and you watch. No histrionics, no waving, no fluttering your eyes. Just watch what you're doing and watch the Invictus Games. That's what you're there for. You're not there to promote Meghan. You're there to promote the Invictus Games.
Don't you think that one of the most extraordinary things about the Invictus Games is that Prince Harry sent out this amazing message? You're not a victim, look what you can do, look what you can achieve despite the terrible things that have happened to you. And what's he done to himself? In complete contradiction to that, in his book and in his documentaries, he's turned himself into a victim. He's always whinging and complaining. Isn't that amazing?
Americans don't like whingers.
No, we don't.
No.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And how disappointing, because what a blessed life he has. He was given the opportunity to marry the woman he loves. Some people in his generations before him were not given that option. He has a beautiful family. The family allowed him to leave and pursue whatever he wanted to pursue. He was given the freedom that he was trying to find. And then he came over to America, and these corporations that had no idea what they were doing just started throwing thousands, if not millions of dollars at two people that weren't equipped to do what they agreed to do. So he's had a very blessed life. You're absolutely right. I'm going to ask one more Meghan Markle question, and I apologize in advance, and then I will let you go. Harry and Meghan showing up to the fires. There was a lot of criticism about that because some volunteers were asked for about 15 minutes to pause, to go away, so that Harry and Meghan could come do their whatever, rubbernecking, looking at all the ash. Meghan uploaded this week a video to Instagram that it was very difficult to watch, but she's acting frazzled because she's reached out to Adam Levine of Maroon 5, who's helped her get some items from Billie Eilish, a pop star, and she's going to give these items to one of the victims of the fire. Can you imagine Princess Diana selfie recording herself, talking about George Michael, helping her get some items from some other celebrity? I just can't imagine Princess Diana, A, announcing the nice thing she was doing, B, recording herself, and C, name dropping. Is Meghan Markle ever going to learn to humble herself? Because it's authenticity. We've all had this conversation before, but I think it's the fact that she comes off as more entitled and arrogant than her husband, who was born into a royal family. It just is very distasteful to some of us in the States. Dickie, you are nodding, so I'm going to go with you first.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, entitled. And that is the root cause of their problems. They feel that they are entitled. Nobody is entitled. You have to work for everything. Sometimes you're successful and sometimes you're not. This whole business of schmoozing your so-called celebrity friends to give things, to give to people, they don't want things like that. What they want is help to get back on their feet again, help to rebuild their houses. Tens of thousands of properties have been destroyed. There are people distraught. They have no insurance and their properties are destroyed. They don't want some B-list or Z-list Hollywood starlet crawling through the ruins saying, oh, you know, taking a head and putting it on her shoulder. They don't want that. They want concrete help. They want help, proper help to rebuild their lives. They don't need so-called celebs coming in. And where have you seen the Hollywood celebs? They're in the same boat. They're not going all over the fire-ravaged area saying, oh, I want to give you this and I want to give you that. They're trying to rebuild their lives as well because they too have lost. There is no demarcation on whether you're rich or poor. You've been a victim of the fire and it's up to you to rebuild. Some with help, some without help. We don't need people like Harry and Meghan to go in for their own sakes. All publicity, that's what it is all about. Self-promotion, entitlement, forget it. If you want to do something useful, get a job and do something useful.
Yeah, Hugo, it did feel, I mean, even Invictus, I'm mentally preparing for Meghan to be promoting With Love Meghan coming out May, whatever, or March, whatever on Netflix. Does she listen to any guidance? How can somebody be so bad at branding themselves? How can somebody be so bad at putting themselves out there? How has she not learned a lesson yet? I gasp at the horror.
I don't know. I don't know about that, but what I did tell, I did watch that clip of her, and by the end of it, when she's sort of giggling about how she's managed to get a T-shirt and a box of stuff for this 15-year-old, it's like suddenly, so it's all right. So Los Angeles didn't really happen. I
Yeah.
mean, I can see that they would get criticized for going to Los Angeles, and with a camera crew and all that. I can also see they would be criticized if they sat in Montecito and didn't do anything. So to some extent, they're in a difficult position. But you come back to this problem over here, and Dickie will remember this very clearly, when we had the terrible Grenfell Tower tragedy. You know, Theresa May, the Prime Minister, went down there to see the victims, and she was slightly criticized. You know, it's doing it for political purposes. When the Queen went, it was completely different because she was not standing for office. And she was not going to go home afterwards and put out a statement about what she'd done. She went there. And when she went there, it was amazing because she brought with her, if you like, Dunblane and Aberfan and all the other places that she'd been to. I wasn't there that day, but I know people who were, said the atmosphere was amazing. I bet you it wasn't like that when the Sussexes went down to Los Angeles. I'm sorry, but it's not the same.
And
And
the
it
late
just,
Queen was very clever because she took Prince William with her as well.
Yeah.
And both of them engaged with the people who had lost everything. And they really had lost everything with no recourse to gather anything back because they weren't insured.
it just felt so silly, Hugo, when she pulls up the lunchbox and is like, a lunchbox, I guess. You have two children. Do you not know what a lunchbox is? It just all feels so fake. And if you are not capable of delivering, just pull back. Just hide. If I think if they would have just stayed quiet for the first 2 years they were here and never criticized the royal family, they would be having a very different relationship with the American public.
Well, it could be a very different relationship with the royal family too. And also, I don't know, but I suspect that a good citizen of America, you know, a farmer somewhere, you know, digging his fields, he doesn't like a guy who goes out and insults his father. You know, it's just not done. You know, it's just a basic human thing. You don't do it. And I bet you that when Prince Harry's older, he will regret the things that he said because, you know, it was very shaming, all that. And of course, go back to that Oprah Winfrey interview. I mean, none of us dared speak after that because she played two very clever cards. One was the race card and one was mental health card. So if you said anything to criticize her, you know, you were going against those things. So what can you do? But I mean, a lot of the things that she said in that interview were absolutely untrue and have been proved to be later on. It's not on, frankly.
Dickie, any predictions for the Invictus Games? Do you think they're going to go full love fest to try to distract from the Vanity Fair divorce book the way that it's being predicted, or what's your take? I'd love to know.
I'd like to see the Invictus Games be the Invictus Games and not the Meghan Markle show, which is what it's been in the past. And if they are clever and if they listen to people who do have the nous to give the right advice and stand back, it is Harry's Invictus Games. He participates. She doesn't. She is just the +1, and she stays +1 in the stands. But they really do need to grow up. They really do need to look at the world for what it is, not themselves, not entitled, but to look at the world for what it is, because it's in a mess. And they're not going to be able to solve anything. Invictus Games coming up. Let the participants participate. Praise them for their valor, for their courage, for trying to get back and be useful people in society. Don't make a show or spectacle of it yourself, and don't promote yourselves at it.
And what Hugo said, practice what you preach. You're the one on stage talking about how, you're not a victim. You should be proud of yourself, and you should be the best person you can possibly be. Well, royal author Hugo Vickers and former press secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth II and King Charles III, Dickie Arbiter, thank you for your wonderful insight. I had so much fun with you. I think that this is a dream team. I think it needs to happen again.
It will happen again. Hugo will have another tie.
Oh, he better. He better. I trust that he will. All right. I will talk to you again very soon. Thank you so much. Have a great day.